The morning arrived in New York with a quiet confidence, the kind that belonged only to the city's earliest hours. Before the traffic roared and before the sidewalks filled with hurried footsteps, Manhattan breathed slowly. Pale sunlight slid between towering buildings, painting long shadows across the streets like stretched fingers waking from sleep. The air carried a chill mixed with the comforting aromas of roasted coffee, fresh bread, and damp concrete still holding on to the memory of last night's rain. At the corner of a modest street market, vendors began their routines. Wooden crates thudded softly onto the pavement. Apples were polished to a gentle shine, oranges stacked with care. Leafy greens misted with water to look alive and inviting. A coffee cart hissed as steam rose upward, curling into the morning sky like a silent signal that the day had officially begun. The market was not yet crowded, only early risers. Delivery workers and a few locals wandered through, enjoying the rare calm. Keanu Reeves stepped into this quiet scene without ceremony. He wore a dark jacket slightly worn at the edges and a cap pulled low, not to hide but out of habit. There was nothing about his posture that demanded attention. His walk was unhurried, almost reflective, as if he were syncing his pace with the slow heartbeat of the city. To anyone watching, he was just another man starting his day, blending effortlessly into the rhythm of New York. He paused near a coffee stand, inhaling deeply as if grounding himself in the moment. The sounds around him, coins clinking, a vendor greeting a customer, the distant rumble of a subway beneath the street, formed a familiar symphony. Keanu's eyes scanned the market with quiet appreciation. There was peace here, a temporary escape from the relentless spotlight that usually followed him. Above, the sun climbed higher, touching the glass windows of nearby buildings and sending flashes of gold across the street. The market glowed softly now, alive but still gentle, like a promise of what the day could be. No one noticed Keanu, no whispers, no cameras, just anonymity rare and precious. Yet beneath the calm, something unseen lingered, like a held breath. The city, though peaceful on the surface, was never truly asleep. Somewhere beyond the market, engines hummed to life, radios crackled, and plans already set in motion edged closer to this quiet corner of Manhattan. Keanu adjusted his jacket and stepped forward, unaware, or perhaps simply unbothered, by the invisible line he was about to cross. The morning felt ordinary, almost comforting. But in New York, even the most peaceful dawn could turn in an instant. And as the sun continued to rise, the stage was silently being set for a moment that would shatter this calm and transform a simple morning market into the center of an unforgettable storm. Keanu moved deeper into the market, the quiet crunch of gravel and pavement beneath, his shoes blending into the low hum of the morning. Around him, life continued in small, ordinary gestures. A woman adjusted her scarf as she inspected tomatoes. An elderly man argued gently over the price of bananas. A delivery worker wiped sweat from his brow. Already tired, though the day had barely begun, no one looked twice at the tall man with kind eyes and a relaxed posture moving calmly between the stalls. This anonymity felt almost surreal. In another hour, this same face would be splashed across screens, dissected by commentators and debated by strangers. But here, at this moment, Keanu Reeves was simply another New Yorker enjoying a slow morning. He stopped at a fruit stand where bright red apples caught his attention, their skins gleaming under the soft sunlight. The vendor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a practiced smile, greeted him without recognition. "Fresh this morning?" the vendor said, lifting an apple and turning it in his hand. Keanu nodded appreciatively, returning the smile. "They look perfect." Their exchange was brief and simple, grounded in the comfort of normalcy. Keanu selected an apple, weighing it thoughtfully before placing it back, as if the decision itself mattered. He asked about the weather, about how business had been lately. The vendor shrugged and laughed softly, complaining about early mornings and unpredictable customers. It was the kind of conversation that filled space without demanding meaning. Behind them, the market slowly grew busier. Footsteps multiplied. Voices layered over one another. The city was waking up properly now. Still, no recognition sparked in the vendor's eyes. No sudden widening of pupils, no whispered name. Keanu remained unseen, and for a fleeting moment that felt like freedom. As he reached into his pocket to pay, a faint sound cut through the noise, a distant siren. It was easy to ignore at first. Sirens were as common in New York as pigeons and honking horns. No one reacted. Not the vendor. Not the shoppers. Not even Keanu, who calmly took his apple and thanked the man. But the sound didn't fade. Instead, it grew closer, louder, more deliberate. Somewhere at the edge of the market, a few heads turned. Conversation softened. The easy rhythm of the morning skipped a beat. Keanu stepped away from the stall, apple in hand, unaware that this simple, human moment, the quiet purchase, the polite smile, the shared laughter was about to become the last normal memory of his morning. The sirens continued their approach, unseen but undeniable, threading tension into the air. And though no one knew it yet, the man who had just been another face in the crowd was moments away from becoming the center of every eye in the market. The sirens no longer felt like background noise. They pressed into the market's atmosphere, sharp and insistent, slicing through conversations and halting laughter mid-breath. What had once blended into the city's usual soundtrack now demanded attention. Heads turned in unison toward the far end of the street, where the sound echoed between buildings like a warning. A black SUV rolled slowly into view, followed by two marked police cars. Their lights flashed silently at first, reflections dancing across shop windows, fruit crates, and the metallic surfaces of coffee carts. The vehicles moved with purpose, not rushing, not hesitating, an approach that carried its own kind of authority. Vendors paused with hands frozen in place. A box of oranges nearly slipped from a worker's grip before he caught it at the last second. The market's energy shifted instantly. The easy flow of foot traffic tightened into clusters. Shoppers stepped aside, instinctively making space. Conversations dropped into whispers. A few people reached for their phones, curiosity already sparking before understanding had time to catch up. Keanu felt it too, the subtle tightening in the air, the unspoken signal that something had changed. He stopped walking and glanced toward the vehicles, his expression calm but attentive. Years in the public, I had taught him to recognize moments when normal life bent toward disruption. Still, there was no fear on his face, only quiet awareness. The SUV came to a smooth stop near the center of the market. An officer stepped out, scanning the crowd with professional precision. Another followed, adjusting his jacket, eyes sharp and focused. Their presence alone seemed to lower the temperature of the morning. Steam from the coffee cart drifted between them like smoke on a stage. A vendor muttered under his breath, unsure whether to be annoyed or alarmed. Someone else whispered, "What's going on?" No one answered. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. Keanu stood still, apple resting loosely in his hand. Around him, the market that had felt warm and welcoming just minutes earlier now felt exposed. Like a spotlight had been switched on without warning. He noticed a young woman staring openly, her gaze moving between him and the officers. Confusion etched across her face. Then one of the officers spoke into a radio, his voice low but firm. The words weren't clear, but the tone carried weight. Another officer's eyes settled on Keanu, not aggressively, not accusingly, but with unmistakable intent. The city seemed to hold its breath. In that suspended moment, the early morning calm finally broke. Whatever peace the dawn had offered was gone, replaced by uncertainty and tension that crept through the market like a cold wind. And as the officers began to move forward, it became clear that this was no routine stop. This was the beginning of something far bigger than anyone in the market had imagined. The officers advanced with measured steps, their boots echoing softly against the pavement. Each sound seemed louder than it should have been, amplified by the sudden hush that had fallen over the market. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a narrow corridor that led directly to Keanu. Crates of fruit, coffee carts, and folding tables became silent witnesses, framing a moment no one had expected to see. One officer raised a hand, signaling the others to slow. His eyes remained fixed on Keanu, studying him not with hostility, but with professional certainty. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, and unmistakably clear. "Mr. Reeves," the name alone rippled through the crowd like electricity. A sharp intake of breath, a few gasps. Recognition sparked instantly in faces that moments ago had been indifferent. Phones were raised higher now, disbelief transforming into urgency as people realized who stood at the center of the scene. Keanu did not step back. He didn't argue or show surprise. Instead, he acknowledged the officer with a small nod, his expression steady. "Yes," he replied, his tone even, respectful. The officer introduced himself and stated that they needed to speak with him immediately. He explained that this conversation could not wait and would require Keanu's cooperation. Though the words were formal, their meaning was heavy. The morning sun caught the edge of the officer's badge, making it gleam sharply as if underlining the seriousness of the moment. Around them, the market was frozen. The fruit vendor Keanu had spoken with earlier stared openly now, his mouth slightly ajar. The apple Keanu had bought sat forgotten in his hand, the symbol of a normal morning suddenly out of place. A woman whispered, "Is that really him?" While another muttered, "This can't be happening." Keanu glanced briefly at the crowd, then back at the officer. There was no anger in his eyes, no panic, only a quiet focus, as though he were listening not just to the words being spoken, but to the weight behind them. "I understand," he said. "Can you tell me what this is about?" The officer hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. He explained that there was an ongoing investigation, and that Keanu needed to be detained for further questioning. Details could not be discussed publicly. The phrase publicly hung in the air, painfully relevant given the growing audience surrounding them. A murmur spread through the crowd, swelling with speculation and disbelief. Cameras zoomed in. A man shouted, "This is a mistake!" Another demanded answers. The market, once calm and intimate, had transformed into a tense public arena. Keanu took a slow breath. He looked down briefly, then back up, meeting the officer's gaze with quiet resolve. Whatever the truth behind the situation, it was clear that this moment, this confrontation, had crossed a line. The private man in the morning market was gone. The murmurs around the market grew louder, blending into a restless wave of voices. But Keanu remained still at the center of it all. The officers waited, watching closely, prepared for resistance that never came. Instead, Keanu exhaled slowly, as if grounding himself in the present moment. His calm felt deliberate, almost protective, shielding the situation from spiraling further out of control. "I'll cooperate," he said quietly, his voice steady enough to cut through the noise. "I just want to understand what's happening." The simple statement carried weight. It wasn't defiance, nor was it submission. It was clarity. One of the officers nodded, acknowledging the tone more than the words themselves. Another officer subtly gestured to the crowd, asking them to step back, though curiosity kept them rooted in place. Keanu gently placed the apple he had been holding onto the edge of a nearby crate. The small action felt symbolic, like setting aside the last piece of normalcy he had been holding onto. His hands were now free, open, visible. There was intention in every movement, a quiet respect for the process unfolding around him. A woman near the front of the crowd spoke up, her voice trembling. "He's always been a good man." Others echoed her sentiment, some nodding, some calling out in support. The officers remained composed, trained to filter emotion from procedure, but even they seemed aware of the unusual gravity of the moment. Keanu turned slightly toward the crowd, not to perform, not to seek sympathy, but to acknowledge them. His expression softened. "Please," he said gently, "let them do their job." The request carried an unexpected authority, one born not from power but from humility. That calmness only heightened the tension. Cameras captured every second. Online, these images would soon be dissected, praised, criticized, and misunderstood. But here, in the market, the moment was raw and human. One officer explained that for safety reasons, Keanu would need to place his hands where they could be seen. Without hesitation, Keanu raised them slowly, palms open, his movements careful and unhurried. The crowd fell silent again, the weight of the gesture sinking in. The morning sun illuminated his face, revealing neither fear nor resentment, only acceptance of a situation he could not control. It was a striking contrast to the chaos building around him. In that moment, Keanu Reeves did not look like a celebrity facing arrest. He looked like a man choosing dignity under pressure, even as the situation tightened its grip. And as the officers prepared for the next step, it became clear that this quiet grace would define the way the world remembered what happened next. The decision had been made, and the shift was subtle but unmistakable. One of the officers stepped closer, his posture firm yet restrained, signaling that the situation had moved beyond conversation. The market, now packed with onlookers, seemed to shrink inward, every eye locked onto the space around Keanu. "Mr. Reeves," the officer said, "you're being detained for further questioning." The words landed heavily, final and irreversible. A low wave of reaction rippled through the crowd. Some voices rose in protest, others in stunned disbelief. The fruit vendor shook his head slowly, unable to reconcile the calm man from minutes earlier with the gravity of the moment now unfolding. Keanu nodded once. There was no argument, no dramatic pause. He simply turned slightly, following the officer's instructions. His hands remained raised, steady and cooperative. The sound of metal echoed softly as the handcuffs were brought forward, sharp, unmistakable and final. When the cuffs closed around his wrists, the click seemed to cut through the entire market. It was a small sound, yet it carried immense weight. A few people flinched. Someone whispered, "This is unreal." Phones zoomed in, capturing the moment that would soon be replayed millions of times. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't lower his head in shame or raise it in defiance. Instead, he stood tall, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. The officers checked the restraints quickly and professionally, their movements practiced, almost routine. Yet even they seemed aware that this arrest was anything but ordinary. As he was gently guided forward, Keanu glanced once more at the market. The early morning light still glowed warmly, but now it felt distant, like a memory already fading. The coffee cart continued to hiss, unattended. A box of apples sat open, one missing from the top, where he had chosen it earlier. The crowd parted as the officers escorted him through. Some people called his name, others simply stared, frozen in disbelief. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking questions she couldn't answer. Outside the market center, a police car waited, its door open. The reality of the situation settled fully now. This wasn't just questioning, it was custody. As Keanu took the final steps toward the vehicle, the city noise began to return. Traffic horns sounded in the distance. A subway rumbled beneath their feet. New York moved on, indifferent and unstoppable. But for those who witnessed it, the moment was seared into memory. A calm morning, a quiet man, and an arrest that would soon echo far beyond this street. As Keanu was guided toward the waiting police car, time seemed to slow in small, fragile fragments. The crowd pressed closer, yet an invisible boundary held them back. In that narrow space between authority and curiosity, something deeply human surfaced. Brief, unscripted moments that cut through the tension. Keanu's gaze shifted, drawn not to the cameras or the flashing lights, but to the familiar face of the fruit vendor. The man stood frozen behind his stall, hands resting on the edge of a crate, eyes wide with disbelief. The apple Keanu had purchased earlier sat where he had placed it, now marked with a small sticker, untouched. It felt like a reminder of how ordinary the morning had begun. Their eyes met for a second. There were no words exchanged, yet the silence spoke volumes. The vendor's expression softened, confusion giving way to something closer to sympathy. Keanu offered a faint, reassuring nod, subtle, almost invisible to anyone else. It was a quiet thank you, an acknowledgement of a moment of normal life that had briefly existed between them. Nearby, a young man lowered his phone, uncertainty flickering across his face. "He doesn't look dangerous," he muttered to no one in particular. An older woman clutched her bag tightly, shaking her head as if trying to wake from a dream. The market, once alive with routine chatter, now felt suspended between empathy and disbelief. An officer opened the car door. Before stepping in, Keanu paused, not to resist, but to take one last look at the street. The sun was higher now, brighter, revealing details he hadn't noticed earlier. The worn paint on the storefronts, the chalk-written prices on cardboard signs, the pigeons pecking fearlessly at crumbs near the curb. Life continued, unbothered by the weight of his moment. A reporter shouted his name, hoping for a statement. Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted his posture, maintaining the same calm dignity he had shown from the beginning. His silence felt intentional, respectful not just to himself, but to the process unfolding. As he lowered himself into the back seat, the door closed with a solid thud. The sound felt final, like the closing of a chapter. Inside the car, the world outside became slightly distorted through the tinted Window, faces blurred, movements slowed. The police car pulled away, leaving behind a stunned market and unanswered questions. The fruit vendor finally exhaled, shaking his head as he returned to his stall. Though nothing about the day felt normal anymore, those who had witnessed it knew they had seen more than an arrest. They had seen a moment of humanity under pressure. Quiet, fleeting, and impossible to forget. The moment the police car turned the corner, the silence it left behind shattered. Sound rushed back into the market all at once, voices overlapping. Questions shouted, theories forming in real time. Phones were no longer just recording. They were uploading. Within minutes, the quiet morning incident transformed into a digital wildfire. News vans arrived with alarming speed, as if they had been waiting just beyond the horizon. Doors flew open. Camera operators jumped out, tripods snapping into place. Reporters adjusted earpieces and straightened jackets, their expressions shifting instantly into practiced urgency. The market became a makeshift press zone, cables snaking across the pavement where fruit crates had stood moments earlier. Confirmed sighting, yes, it's him. Arrest in Manhattan early morning. Witnesses say he cooperated fully. Fragments of information flew through the air, incomplete and unverified, yet powerful enough to shape perception. Vendors found themselves surrounded by microphones, asked to explain a moment they barely understood themselves. The fruit vendor hesitated before speaking, eyes still unsettled. He was polite, he said finally. Just normal. Helicopter blades thudded faintly overhead, adding to the chaos. Social media exploded. Headlines appeared within seconds, each more dramatic than the last. Some called it a misunderstanding. Others speculated wildly. Photos of Keanu in handcuffs, calm and composed, spread across screens worldwide, sparking debates before facts could catch up. The market's original purpose, fresh food, morning routine, simple exchange, was completely lost. Prices written in chalk were smeared by hurried footsteps. Coffee cups lay abandoned, still warm. The space had been consumed by narrative, by the hunger for answers and clicks. Across the city, televisions flickered on in offices, apartments, and cafes. People paused mid-sip, staring at the screen in disbelief. How did a peaceful morning walk turn into this? The question echoed everywhere, yet no one had a clear answer. Back at the market, an officer attempted to push the press line back, restoring some order, but the damage was done. The story had escaped the street and entered the world, beyond anyone's control. As the sun climbed higher over New York, one truth became undeniable. This was no longer just an arrest. It was a spectacle, a mystery, and a test of public trust, all unfolding under the relentless glare of the media. The police car disappeared down the street, but the echo of what had just happened lingered like a heavy fog. The market, once buzzing with the simple rhythms of daily life, now felt oddly hollow. People stood frozen in small clusters, whispering to one another, replaying the events in their minds. Every detail, the calm composure of Keanu Reeves, the clicking of the handcuffs, the sudden arrival of officers was dissected, debated, and magnified in a way that made the morning feel unreal. No one had answers. The officers had left without explanation beyond the barest statements, and the media's rapid-fire reporting only fueled speculation. Was it a misunderstanding? An ongoing investigation? A public stunt? Each theory carried its own mix of anxiety and fascination. Even those who had witnessed the arrest firsthand couldn't reconcile the peaceful, approachable man they saw buying an apple, with the global headlines now spreading like wildfire. The fruit vendor, still standing behind his stall, tried to resume work but found it impossible. The apples and oranges seemed suddenly irrelevant, small, and fragile compared to the drama that had erupted in his quiet corner of the city. He shook his head slowly, murmuring, "I don't understand." "Nothing makes sense," his customers offered polite, awkward smiles, but the atmosphere was heavy with confusion. The crowd began to disperse, but the tension remained. People checked their phones, refreshed news feeds, and shared videos, each new clip raising more questions than it answered. Keanu's calmness under arrest became a focal point. How could someone be so composed in a moment most would find terrifying? Why had the authorities moved so quickly? And what exactly was the nature of the investigation? Every question seemed to multiply the moment's intensity rather than clarify it. Even as traffic resumed and the market returned, superficially to its normal rhythm, A subtle change lingered. The morning had shifted irreversibly. The city had witnessed a collision of celebrity, authority, and public curiosity, and no one in that market or anywhere following the story would see New York mornings the same way again. Above the street, sunlight glinted off the tall glass buildings, indifferent to the human drama below. Life in the city went on. Subways rumbled, taxis honked, and coffee carts steamed as if nothing had happened. But for those who had witnessed the arrest, the image of Keanu Reeves walking calmly under the weight of handcuffs would remain etched in memory, a quiet reminder that even in chaos, composure could be extraordinary. The unanswered questions hung in the air, heavy and persistent. Why now? How did this happen? And most importantly, what would come next? The morning that began like any other had ended as a turning point, a puzzle that the world would want solved, but the answers were still out of reach. By mid-morning, the market had returned to something resembling routine, but the atmosphere remained charged, tinged with a quiet unease. The sun now stood high in the sky, casting harsh lines across the street and illuminating the scattered debris of the morning's chaos. Toppled crates, discarded coffee cups, and phones still recording snippets of what had happened. For the vendors, the day was a strange mixture of business as usual and surreal reflection. Conversations were hesitant, punctuated by glances toward the empty stretch of road where Keanu Reeves had disappeared. With the police, the city, however, had already moved faster than the market could. Online, social media churned relentlessly. Every video clip, every eyewitness account, every photo of Keanu's calm demeanor in handcuffs went viral within minutes. Headlines painted dramatic narratives, some sympathetic, some accusatory. The story unfolded in real time, leaving the public scrambling to interpret a single morning event from multiple perspectives. News anchors replayed footage, political commentators debated, and fans expressed shock and concern. Yet amidst the noise, the truth remained just out of reach. Back at the market, life attempted to reclaim its rhythm. The fruit vendor dusted off his hands and resumed stacking apples. Coffee carts steamed and served lattes to the few loyal early risers. Children ran past, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded hours earlier. But the shadow of the arrest lingered. People who had witnessed it couldn't quite shake the image of a calm, composed man walking quietly into a police car while the world watched, suspended between disbelief and admiration. For Keanu Reeves, though absent from the market now, the morning's events were only the beginning. The arrest, though public and dramatic, was a gateway to questions, scrutiny, and the inevitable investigation that awaited him. His grace under pressure had left a strong impression, yet it could not shield him from the ripple effects, both personal and professional, that would follow in the coming hours. And for New York itself, the morning had shifted something subtle but permanent. A routine street market, the kind that had existed unchanged for decades, now held a story that would be retold countless times. A tale of calm amidst chaos, of a man caught in circumstances far beyond his control, and of a city that witnessed a moment that was extraordinary in its ordinariness. As the sun climbed higher and shadows shortened, one truth became clear to those who had seen it all. Mornings in New York would never be quite the same again. The serenity of the dawn had been pierced by a spectacle, leaving behind questions, memories, and a story that would echo far beyond the quiet street where it all began.